I would like to welcome today Mr. DeMarco, who is the founder and president of International Decisions, Inc., a management consulting company. And his presentation for you today is full of content for small companies that lack the manpower and the resources of larger companies to still make and implement strategies to go abroad. Mr. DeMarco has over 25 years experience in international business in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and he spent about 35 years with Solar Turbines, managing multi-million-dollar contracts, and actually was part of a team that won the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award for international business development. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Tim DeMarco.
Well, thanks. Well, can you hear me okay? I'll try not to yell. Thanks very much. Appreciate everything. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you a little bit about international business. As a kind of a preface, and I think I have 40 minutes and I'm really going to try to hold this down, but this presentation could go for probably over an hour, so I'm going to try to get through it in a short time. But you know, companies like to go international. There are large companies, and they do it all the time, but small companies can really go international as well, but you have to do it the right way, and that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to cover big versus little. Solar Gas Turbines was a subsidiary of Caterpillar, and Caterpillar is a Fortune 50 company. So we had resources out the gazoo. The last, when I retired from Solar, I opened my own company, International Decisions, and it's to consult small and medium-sized companies to go overseas. And the little companies don't have the kind of things that the large companies have. And so what I'm trying to do is to give some idea of how to do that. Okay. We're going to talk big versus little, general observations, something about marketing, your product, what your product has to look like. That's the other thing. I'm kind of coming at this from a company that has a product rather than a service, okay? So it may be a high-tech product, it may be a low-tech product, but you know, I'm looking at a company with a product rather than a lawyer or a legal company or a consulting company or a marketing company or somebody like that. So we're going to talk product distribution, financial, something about service, and then maybe some of my observations after doing international for a while. Okay, big versus little. Big companies have an enormous advantage going overseas. Like I said, CAT was a Fortune 50 company. They had plenty of money. They had 50 or 60,000 employees, overseas offices. If I wanted to know what was going on in Singapore, I'd call the Singapore office. Want to know what was going on in the Middle East, I'd call the Dubai office. It was no problem. They knew more than the U.S. government about what was going on because they were on the ground all the time. And in most cases, they were local nationals. They have a large-scale sales departments. They are able to leverage their direct sale with their dealers, with their representatives, with their agents, with other people on the ground. So even though Solar had a finite-sized sales department, we could leverage it to hundreds of people out selling our product. They had no problem doing it. They had the money to do that. The support staff at I could talk about Solar, although Caterpillar was a lot bigger. We had 9 lawyers on staff at Solar. 9 lawyers writing international contracts, giving us advice on international business, what we could do, what we couldn't do. Our subsidiary in the EU, in Brussels, Belgium, had a full staff of lawyers there. If we had to know something about the EU law, and I found out one time in one of my contracts I was actually violating the Treaty of Rome, but they could tell you that. Marketing research, Marcom, brochures, trade shows, etc. There's nothing they can't do. Service was the same way. The large companies have service everywhere. Small companies don't. So when you're a large company, if you decide to go into a country that you're not into, there are ways of finding out how to do it. What's the best way to do it? Should we do it? What's our product need to look like? They can do that a lot easier than small companies. So what I'd like to talk about is a small company. On the other hand, small companies lack substantial financial strength. I've been consulting for a small company that's two guys just out of the garage. They have nothing. They have no money at all, but we're going overseas. The small companies are living, just from day to day, hoping their receivables turn into cash. Small companies may only have one office, the home office, and that would be the office that they're renting. It could even be their garage, depending on what size the company is. Little or no sales staff. This little company that I was consulting for had a total sales staff of 3. It included the president and 2 other people on the staff. Their small companies are probably have to go to the market through distributors and dealers because they just don't have the bandwidth to get out there and have a direct sales department that'll sell something in another country. It's probably just the way they have to do it. Little or no in-house support, right. Most small companies don't have the money to hire a CFO or don't have the money to have an in-house attorney. It's not there. So all that is outsourced locally on an as-needed basis, and you hope you can afford it. Everybody in a small company does 2 or 3 jobs, right? The president is the head of engineering, and when he sells a product, he goes over to the shop and he packages it up and ships it out. So they're really stretching their resources. The only thing that a small company might have going for it that can equal what a large company has is the product. There are a lot of small companies that have a very, very unique product that is protected by patents that could be used around the world. And that's kind of the equalizer. If you have a product like that, you can go overseas. Well, that's what I said. If you have a niche product, there is a demand for your product, you can sell it overseas. The other thing about international sales is international sales supports high-paying domestic jobs, a lot higher paying than domestic does. And the revenue from your international business can be used to fund a development program, to develop more products, to sell them overseas, to earn more revenue, to develop more products to get into different markets. So your small companies kind of have to, unless they're funded tremendously well, and that is not the case in most cases, they have to bootstrap their way up. If your exit strategy is to be acquired, and I've talked to companies, I walked into a company and within the first 15 minutes they said our exit strategy is to be acquired in 18 months. And we talked and I told them you have nothing to acquire. And so their immediate strategy was to be bought by somebody, and they hadn't proven their technology. But if you are a small company and your strategy, your exit strategy is to be acquired by someone, then an international component to your company is really going to make you look good because it's going to say that, hey, you've been out there, you have some experience. The international market is large. I mean, I don't have to tell you, you've heard it all over the place, how the population of the U.S. is so small and the population of the rest of the world is gigantic. But our economy is the largest in the world. But the international market is enormous. It is enormous, and it is a great place to be. Quite frankly where I've spent most of my business life. Just some general observations about going international. It is not easy. It really is not easy. It is very difficult. That is not to say that it is not rewarding. Quite honestly, I would rather do international than domestic. It's hard, but man, is it ever fun. And when you win a job, especially over either a big U.S. competitor or a foreign competitor, the feeling is euphoric. I can tell you it is. Negotiations take more time overseas than in the U.S. 2 U.S. companies can sit down at the table here, and before lunch is over, they can have a deal. It doesn't happen internationally. Most of you were probably not alive when the Vietnam War was going on. I was. When the war was over and they decided to have the peace negotiations in Paris, the U.S. delegation went over and rented a couple of hotel rooms, and they rented an apartment, and the North Vietnamese delegation bought a house. See? They understood what the difference was and how the negotiations were going to go. That's what negotiating international contracts is like. It's not that easy. Patience, 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 patience. I can add another patience. You really have to be patient because some things really take time. Advanced planning and homework. Today it is much easier than it was 30 years ago. You've got the internet. You can do all of your advanced planning from your bedroom. Before we couldn't do it like that. So you can do a lot and save a lot of money by doing advanced planning and knowing what you're doing and where you're going. Again, I'm talking from the position of a product. Do a SWOT analysis. Put your product out there, hypothetically, and find out what's going on. I think the other thing is to know why you want to go international. I mean, do you want to just have INTL behind your company name? Is the market for your product larger internationally than it is domestically? Does your product appeal more to the international market than it does domestically? Do you see it as a way to gain additional revenue? I mean, there are a whole bunch of things, and none of them are necessarily wrong, but know why you're doing this. Don't just go out and do it, because if you don't have any dedication in doing it, you're probably not going to succeed. Look at areas with similar requirements as the U.S. And what I mean by that is I'm consulting for a company right now that makes an environmental product. And what this product does is it prevents sewer spills. Okay? So does it really make sense for us to try to target a country or a region that doesn't really care if you have sewer spills? No. Makes no sense at all. So what I'm trying to help them understand is look for an area, a region, or a country that has the same idea about preventing sewer spills, that has an environmental program, that will fine you if you have a sewer spill, that cares whether you have sewage on the street. Start there. Don't just start someplace else randomly that really doesn't care. And I've talked a little, find out if there's an international demand for your product. For most products, there really are. There may be some, I'm sure that there is no international demand, and so then you shouldn't even think about international. But if you size up the market, look at what you think you can capture. If the market is so big and you think that your potential is very little, maybe this doesn't make sense for you. So look at what's out there and look at what you think that you can get, and then go after it. Who are your customers? Are your customers just private citizens? Is it the government that's going to buy your product? Is it other corporations? Is it corporations? Let's say you make a product that goes inside of a computer. So your customer is the company that makes computers. Where are they? So kind of know who your customers are and what their buying habits are and their policies. Again, a lot of this is internet, and a lot of it is attending things like this and probably presentations like mine that go into a little bit more detail. Do the study. Do the study. Find out, will the U.S. approach to selling the product work in the other country or the region that you're going to? It may not. You may have a direct sale here. You may have manufacturers' reps. Manufacturers' reps might not work in another country. Be prepared to change the approach that you have here and customize it for the country or the region or the area that you're going to. Some of this is pretty common sense. Culturally, you have to know what's going on. I've done a lot of business in Japan. You just don't walk into the Japanese and sign a contract. There are a lot of relationships that do the business in Japan. It's not always the technical presentation. It's not always the lowest price. It's a relationship thing. So in that country, you have to modify your approach a little bit from the way you would do it, say, like in Germany or someplace like that. What service coverage does your market require? And I use the Japan experience. Does it require Japan-style service? Japan-style service is the customer is God, and that's it. And there is nothing less than that. And I can give you 10 examples of that. I can give you more than 10. Maybe your company, the area that you want to go to doesn't require that level of service. But maybe if you give that level of service, that will differentiate you from a possible competitor. So think about the kind of service. I'm going to speak about service a little later in the talk, but look, your sales department sells your first product, and your service department sells all of the follow-on product after that. Just think about your own experiences. Warranty coverage. Here, the typical industrial or business, the warranty is 1 year on material and workmanship. After that, there's no more warranty. Sometimes the warranty is even less. There are countries where that doesn't work. You have to have a 1 year warranty, parts, labor, everything. You come out and fix it. Maybe it has to be a 2 year warranty. So you have to know what you're getting into because this affects your price. If you have to warranty something for 2 years as opposed to 1 year, you may have to add money to the price of your equipment to cover that warranty for the second year. Competition. You may have a very unique product. There may or may not be competitors out there. Your competitors may be in the region that you're looking at. Competitors may be in Chicago. You have to look at who's competing out there and compare your product to the competitor's product. Are you better? Are they better? Why? Is it technical? Is it price? Is it service? Is it distribution? Who is out there and how do they compete? I was helping a company to distribute their product in the UK. There are competitors in the UK. The communication system with the UK competitor was no way as good as the communication system with the US product. They were about the same price, but they had local representation all over the place. Each one of the competitors had 300 units with the companies that we were looking at. It was going to be a hard job, to win over the competitors. We're actually going to get an order. But you have to really know who your competitors are and how they go to market and what they charge and how they service and where they're coming from. You may be competing in a job in the UK and the competitor may not be from the UK, may not be from America, it may be from Korea. Got to know that. And know why would that company, let's stay in the UK for a minute, but why would that company pick you over a local? What would make them do that? Talk to yourself and find out why, and talk to the customers and find out why. Okay, I covered it a little bit: pricing, technical features, and a customer-friendly product. But I guess the point is know your competition. And that's, again, pretty basic in business. Know your competition. But internationally, your competition is going to be way different. It's not going to be the guy next door. It's going to be somebody all over the world, thanks to the internet and the ease of travel that we have today. Look, when you're a small company and you're not a Caterpillar or IBM or GE or somebody like that, and you want to go international, it really kind of makes sense to stick close to where you are located now. To try to sell your product into Canada or Mexico is a pretty easy jumping off point. Canada is almost like the U.S., but it's still a foreign country to us, okay? And Mexico the same way. Try it there. Get your feet wet. Make your mistakes there. It's a lot cheaper to fly to Ottawa to solve a problem than it is to South Africa. So start out close to home, then expand. I'm not saying spend 15 years close to home, but get the feel of how it goes and what happens and how business is done. One thing that is easy for companies to do is to shotgun their international expansion. And by this I mean, I was consulting for a company, and they got an inquiry. They got inquiries in a short period of time from Egypt, from Germany, from Hong Kong, and from Australia, and from the UK. That's all over the world. And one from Brazil. So what are we going to do? We're going to pack everybody up and start flying to all these countries and try to get the business? No, you can't do it. You got to do the due diligence that I talked about earlier, but you got to find out where is my greatest chance of success, and let's try there first, and then let's move on to the next location. Because the guy in Egypt had a large order potential, but he was just looking for information. You have to find that out, okay? So we have to do our due diligence on this side to make sure that the customers that are looking for our product are really serious customers and they're not just looking for information or could be a competitor. Shotgunning international expansion is extremely expensive, and for a small company, it can break you, and you could be out of business. Let's talk about product for a minute. This is another extremely critical thing. I say your product has to be bulletproof, and I really mean that it has to be bulletproof. You cannot have a product that's almost developed and say, well, let's take it overseas, because if it breaks overseas, you're going to have a reputation problem. You will have a service problem. You may have a dealer that decides he doesn't want to work with you anymore because your unit is not good. You have to have all the bugs worked out. You have to have all the generic infant mortality type problems worked out of your product, and it has to be ready to go, and it has to work. Yeah, there are going to be failures from time to time, but you have to make sure that the product is ready to go. This is a hard thing to tell somebody when they're trying to get out into the market right away and get international business. But believe me, the extra time spent on making sure that your product is right will be worth it in the end, because that will be, again, a differentiator possibly between you and an international competitor. I said correcting problems could cost 5 to 10 times as it does in the U.S. Just as an example, about a year ago, I was in England doing a one-week project for a company. And before I went, I asked the administrative assistant to keep track of every single penny that I'm spending on this trip. I left on a Saturday, I got there on Sunday, did business Monday through Friday, and flew home on Saturday, okay? At the end of the day, her total at the end, $6,000. I don't eat lavish meals. In fact, I flew economy. I stayed in just Holiday Inn. In other words, I took the trains, took taxi. I didn't spend a lot of money. That was a $6,000 trip. I took that spreadsheet, I gave it to the owners of the company, and I said, this is what happens if you make a mistake somewhere else besides here. That if you have a product in Phoenix and you have to fix it, maybe the total cost of flying over on Southwest Airlines, flying back the same day, $600, not $6,000. You have a problem in Frankfurt, it's $6,000. So that's why your product has to be bulletproof. That's why you have to have everything in its place before you go. I go back to Japan again. Japan, you'd have a hard time getting into Japan to begin with. But if it doesn't work, you'd be out. That market the door would be shut. You wouldn't be there anymore. So anyway, I could not dwell on this too much. Product has to be right. Certifications, CSA for Canada, CE, ATEX, MITI in Japan, Aussie specs for Australia. Everybody has their own specs. You have to look at what certifications you need. I'll go back to the UK story. I was in the UK. I was helping this company with their product. I went into a company. They had a need for 3,400 units, which would have been for this company about a $12 million order. First thing they said was, "Are you ATEX certified?" I said, "No." I said, "Thanks. Nice going." No order. Got rejected. So I tried to tell them a year before they needed ATEX certification, and they said, no, we don't want to spend the money on it. Okay. So you got to know what you need, you got to get it, then you go after the business. Manuals and instructions. Look, if your customer is going to install your product or work on your product or operate your product, you've got to have really good manuals. How many times have you bought something at Best Buy or Fry's or someplace like that and read the manual, and it looks like somebody wrote the manual and they didn't understand the English language. They were from the moon or something like that. You can't understand how to do it. It's happened to me. I know it's happened to all of you too. So your literature, your brochures, your flyers, your leaflets, everything that you use to make to sell your product and make it work and operate it has to be right. It has to be good. English is the universal business language. And so most of the people that probably buy the product are going to speak English. But maybe the people that operate the product don't speak English. And those are the ones that you have to, kind of cater to as far as the manuals and instructions and things like that go. Product distribution. I think you kind of have to, depending on the market that you're going to, you really have to look early on and decide, how are we going to do this? Maybe you're doing direct sale in the U.S., and that's good. You have 15 salespeople or 10, and you can cover the U.S., and it works fine. Maybe that doesn't work someplace else. Maybe you have a product. A person I've worked with has a product that they sell on the internet. There's no international sales department. There's nothing. Just they're out there on the internet, the orders come in, and they ship the product. Maybe distributors and dealers are the way to go, and they have a lot to offer. So if you have a product and you can't afford a direct sales force, you might look at distributors, dealers, and other help. The best control, of course, is with your own corporate sales presence in whatever country or region that you're going to. That means that they will spend 100% of their waking hours on your product. It's not the case with dealers and distributors. Local partners are very helpful. Even if you have a dealer, you might need another local partner. You might need an agent. Middle East is very famous for this. Talking a little bit about dealers and distributors, okay? This route to market costs a little bit less than having your own sales force, but you sacrifice a little bit too. Like I said, they don't give you 100% of their time. Dealers and distributors, no matter whether they're in the U.S. or the Netherlands or wherever, are looking at how much money your product gives them in the way of gross margin, and they take that amount of money and decide how much time they're going to devote to your product. So you might have a dealer that has several other products that says, I can only give these guys 4 hours a week. Wow, that's not very much. And you'd like to have them do 40 hours a week. So you lose a little bit for a dealer, but you also gain a little bit because they know what's going on locally. You have to really train them, because we have, even with your own sales force, even with your dealers here in the U.S., I have gone out with dealers in the U.S. and listened to them give the sales presentation. And it's like, what product are you talking about? That's not this product. So you really have to train them, and they have to understand what they're doing. You're sharing profits with a dealer and a distributor as well. So your margins are going to be a little bit different than they are here, but the market is a lot larger. So they have got to make money again, otherwise they won't carry your product. Choosing, I should have even added to this, a dealer, distributor, agent, representative is really important. Some of these folks out there want your product because they see that you are the only one in the world that could do this way, and they want to carry your product because they will have an advantage over anybody else that they're working with. So they might tell you anything. Can you, do you know people in this industry? Oh yeah, yeah, I know everybody there. Well, they may not. And so what I've always done was I've always devised tests. And I've always asked potential agents, dealers, reps a question. And their answer is an answer that I know. And we'll see how they answer the question. And that determines whether they go to the next level or not as far as consideration. Be inquisitive. Do not trust anybody, or do not trust everybody, not anybody, but everybody, because your objective is to grow your company and sell your product. And their objective maybe is to take your product and not let anybody else get it, because it might affect another product that they have. So be careful. Use the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce Gold Key service is fantastic. For small companies, it's very, very, very affordable. The cost is very small. You write an introductory letter about your company, tell them about your company, tell them about your product, you send brochures. They will then go out to all of the potential dealers and distributors in their regional area, whatever they're responsible for, and they will go and bring in 10 or 15 potential dealers that you could talk to. And you can eliminate some of them, right away. You can call them on the phone. You can, send them an email. Ultimately, you're going to have to go there in person and interview them. I did this for this company in the UK. Got a dealer right on my first trip right out, and they're doing really, really well. So use the resources that you have that don't cost a lot of money, Department of Commerce. I said you may be there on a timely basis. Look, if you have a distributor or a dealer and you may do the training and everything, you don't just, tell them, okay, thanks a lot, and they don't see you anymore, because they may forget you. So early on, you may have to go there 3 or 4 times a year, maybe once a year after that, maybe a couple of times. It kind of depends on how the business goes, but you cannot not be there. Even though this is a day of internet and GoToMeeting.com and everything, being there is a lot different. If you use dealers or distributors or agents, you need to create a really good agreement. You have to have the authority to manage the distribution of your product from here. And, you have to, what happens if you sign this dealer and all of a sudden they don't do anything? I mean, that's happened to me. I have fired more dealers than I can imagine, because you sign them up, yeah, everything's good, okay, and you see that, and the market is big out there, and then you don't get any orders. What's going on? Well, I was busy selling this. I'll get to you guys, in 6 months. After a while, it's like, you're done. So really do your due diligence on your dealers. And you have to create a contract. What I do is I don't sign a full-blown contract on day one. What I'll do is say, why don't we do an MOU? Let's date for a while, okay, before we do anything serious. Let's do an MOU. We'll treat you like a dealer. We'll train you. Let's see how it goes for a year, okay? If it goes okay, then let's sign the full agreement. If things don't work out, well then, it's been nice knowing each other, and we go onward from there. And then we're not stuck with a contract, because, excuse me, contracts sometimes have to have certain language in them that's required by the country that you're working in. And so it's not, it's not that easy. So what do you do if the dealer violates the agreement? Well, like I say, I like the MOU process. And the MOU allows you to get out of the MOU within like 30, 60, 90 days, you're out. And they can get out too if they want to. Again, dealer training is vital, and I think I've talked about this a little bit. If your dealer, distributor says the wrong thing, you got a problem. Your dealer may need a demonstration kit or some kind of a starter kit to demo your product. You have to provide that. How do you handle the marketing collateral? Who makes the brochures in the language that you need to have them printed in? Is that you? Is it the dealer? The dealer, I try to put a lot of this expense off on the dealer, because I tell them they have to have an investment in the product. And a lot of the dealers have no problem. They put out brochures and they'll put out bulletins and things like that. Okay, I said, do you need a local agent? You need to find this out early. I did Middle East for 5 years. My dealer was my agent. In some cases, I had a dealer, or in some cases, we had direct sale, and I still needed an agent. So again, you need to know, culturally what goes on in your particular market. I've talked about some of this stuff, but I want to talk about this one right here. Hang on, I got a pointer here. I want to talk about this one right here, exclusivity. Dealers, distributors, they like to have exclusivity. And it's like, okay, I want to be the only one carrying your product here, and nobody else is allowed to carry it, and therefore I'm protected with exclusivity. Well, that's great. But that exclusivity is a two-way street. You have exclusivity, you better promise to sell so much product per year. You don't sell the product, then we need to talk about the exclusivity. So what I found that works, and it doesn't work all the time, and we have to do other things if it doesn't, but what I found is, let's do this. I will write into the contract that it is a policy of my company to only have one dealer or distributor in a geographical area, and that's it. And I will not have other dealers in the geographical area. In return, you will meet the sales objective, provide the product at a good light, and do whatever. If in my determination you are not achieving what you are supposed to do, then I have the right to come in and directly access the market and sell to the customers, even if it means I hire another dealer. Okay? This sometimes takes some real negotiation to get a dealer to swallow this, but quite honestly, you have no choice. If this has happened to me in Japan. Somebody had exclusivity, and they actually went on to develop their own product in competition with my product. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I give you exclusivity, you're developing a product to compete with me? So it all changed. So you really have to protect yourself on exclusivity. And that's why I say, when somebody says exclusivity, yes and no. You have it as long as you do the job. When you don't do the job, you lose it. And the answer to that, if they complain, is like, so are you not planning to sell the product? Are you not planning to advertise my product? Or is that what that means? Oh, no, we're going to do a good job. Okay, well, if you do a good job, you have no problems. What if your dealer decides to represent a competitor? Just remember, you're the one that decides whether the competitor is a competitor and not the dealer, distributor, or agent. You know the product, you know your product, you know whether something is competing with you or is not competing with you. They might think that this product they want to add has no competition whatsoever, it's nothing, it's no problem, it won't affect you at all. It may very well affect you. You're the one that makes that decision, not your dealer. Kind of not a financial guy, mostly business development, marketing, sales, etc., but I've gotten involved in every one of this. When you go overseas, you've got to look at what are your expenses going to be when you're selling something in Hong Kong, or you're selling it to Korea, or you're going to China. What does it really cost you to do that? What is on an annual basis, what are you going to spend for travel, for communications, for service, for expenses, for legal, for whatever? You need to look at that. If you go into that without knowing some of this, you're going to get some really big surprises. Remember the $6,000 price tag to the UK. Is there duty? Is there not duty? Maybe you're in NAFTA and you don't have to worry about it. But maybe your product is a high-tech product that has a duty on it. Maybe the U.S. Customs will give you a hard time to try to export that product outside of the country. You've got to know some of these things. And this is the due diligence that you have to do. Again, computer. Local taxation. What I've always tried to do is make my international offices marketing offices, not corporate offices. If it's a corporate office, you're going to be liable to probably local tax, and you're going to try not to pay local tax. So I try to make my international offices local marketing offices. That means the quote comes from me in the U.S. to the local office. They give it to the customer gives the PO right back to me right here in the U.S. And all that office does is go and make the presentation and do some other things. And they're not a local entity. Because when you start getting into local entities, now you've got a tax issue. And I'm not an expert on taxes, but I've been there and done that a little bit. And it can get big. Pricing. How do you calculate your price that you're going to charge overseas? I had a guy from Canada about 2 months ago tell me, I'm sick and tired of you American companies that come up here. You immediately want to jack up your prices 10 or 15%, and I don't understand why. I mean, this is almost like North U.S., and why are you raising your prices? And I told him, you're right. We're not going to charge you any more than we charge the guy in New York City. Boom. However, if the freight costs more to get to Ottawa, we're going to charge you the extra for the freight. If there's a certification or some kind of a duty or customs charge or tax or VAT or whatever it is, we're not going to pay it. You pay it, but the price is going to be the same. You have to kind of think of that when you're going overseas. You will ultimately develop. We did this when I was with Solar. We ultimately developed a multiplier for the EU, a multiplier for the Middle East, a multiplier for Africa, a multiplier for South America, a multiplier for Asia, over and above what the domestic price is, based on all the costs that we know that we had to add in to do business in that part of the world. One of the things that I like to do, and that I was teaching this one company that I was consulting for, is walk yourself logistically through a project. A project came in one day from Jordan. They wanted 100 units. I said, okay, let's walk ourselves through the project. Okay, here are 100 units, and here's the price of the units. Okay, now what do? We have to ship them over there. Okay, add that price. Is there any customs or duty or anything we have to do? Add that. Okay, now it's landed in Jordan. Now what do? Well, somebody has to go pick it up and install it. Well, who installs it? Do they install it? Okay, let's say they install it. Are they trained? No. Well, they have to be trained. Who's going to train them? Excuse me, we're going to train them. Oh, are we going to go there, or are they going to come here? What's the best way to train them? Well, whatever the best way to train them is, that's got to be figured in there. Okay, now we've got 100 units sitting in Jordan, and they're installed, and they're running. What happens if something breaks down? They need spare parts. Well, what kind of spare parts do we need? How many batteries, how many of the instrumentation do you need per 100 as far as the breakage? You have to. They wanted 3 years of spare parts. We had to figure what 3 years of spare parts cost. We added that to the job. So we walked our way logistically all the way through the job, from the time that it leaves your factory or your shop to the customer's installation and startup and operation. The result was the price of the product delivered with the spare parts in Jordan was twice what we would sell it to a customer in Utah, let's say. But it wasn't because we were ripping them off. It's because it cost a lot more money to do that in Jordan than it did here. How do you get paid? Well, the way I go is you get paid in dollars every time. Okay, I'm going to go on a little bit, okay? You get paid in dollars every time. Even the distributor that we have in the UK, we're going to get paid in dollars. Not in foreign currency, because somebody has to take the foreign currency risk. And depending on where you're dealing, that could be substantial. And your customer or your dealer's got to take that foreign currency risk. How do you get paid? I guess I'm a proponent, maybe it's old school, LC. LC is the way you get paid. You have an LC, you do exactly what it says on the LC. The West Coast bank that the LC is handling puts the money right in your local bank account, you're done. I kind of have a saying, money in the bank before product leaves the U.S. Now, you may have a dealer that you're dealing with that's very good, that's very reliable, that has plenty of money, that's very honest. You might want to put them on open account. Put them on open account. I had a dealer one time in, would you believe, Switzerland. Open account. Pretty soon, their account grew to $30 million. They didn't pay. I put them on LC right away. After they paid back their back money and they were on LC for a year, paying for all their product for a year, the president, I was talking to their president, I said, Bernier, maybe we should take you off LC and put you on open account because it's kind of a pain in the neck for you guys to, go get the LC all the time. He says, no, 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 no. Leave us on LC for a while. I think we need the discipline. But anyway, you want to make sure that you get paid. I can tell you stories that will take a lot more time about people sending product to an overseas location and never seeing the money. And there's nothing that you can do about it. Nothing. You can buy insurance from XM and others for non-payment, especially in some very critical areas. More on pricing. Use Incoterms. This says Incoterms 210. I think the latest one is 2013. All the international companies understand you're quoting X dollars, X works, San Diego. They understand that. And if you go by the Incoterms, it specifies exactly what exactly does that mean. What does FAS mean? What does FOB mean? They know what that means, and they're probably dealing with Incoterms with other customers. Use the Incoterms, put out by the American International Chamber of Commerce. Service. Well, I said I'd get the service. If your product requires service, it really has to be local. Let's say that you're here and you're buying a product, and you see a product and you want that product, and and it's a Korean company. And you say, okay, well, wow, this product costs $14,000, and I'm going to invest in it because I need it in my medical practice or whatever. And so where do I go for service? Oh, Seoul. Seoul? You don't, well, do you have a service rep or anybody in San Diego? No. California? No. U.S.? Sorry. You might look somewhere else for that product. You might be willing to accept something less that has service locally rather than to accept that product that might be the best in the world that has service in Seoul. So your service kind of has to be local. Does your product require maintenance? In many cases, not all, the service business is a substantial portion of your gross margin, and you must protect that, get a handle on it, and make it happen. So as you're going overseas, you really have to get deeply involved in service. Like I said, the service department sells the rest of your business. And also, who's going to administer the warranty? Is it going to be your dealer over there, 5,000 miles away, or is it going to be you here? You have to decide on that. Okay, I'm just about done. The last thing here is, look, local service makes you look like one of the big guys. So, GE has service locally. Yeah, so do we. Okay, these are my final thoughts. Get patent protection. If you need to protect something, get patent protection. Do not think that the Chinese are the only ones that'll rip off your IP. That is not true. They will. There are a lot of people out there that'll do it as well. They're not the only ones. Get protection. Guard your IP. Are you finished? If you're hacked, let's say you're hacked and somebody gets your IP, are you done? Are you out of business? Better take steps to prevent that. There are steps you can take to do that. Assume your customers and partners and associates are better negotiators than you are. Look, most Americans from the time they're 5 years old go down to the store, they buy something for $2.95, they give the cashier $3 to get a nickel back, and they go home. Most other foreign countries, it's not like that. They haggle from the time they're 5 years old. And so now here you are going to try to sell something that's been to somebody that's been negotiating and haggling for the last 20 years, and they're expecting that, and you are at a big disadvantage. So you better be careful and understand that you may be less of a negotiator than they are. You eventually have to go to the country that you're working with. You cannot do all of it over the internet, even though you can do quite a bit. Create processes if you're a small company. I know if you're two guys in a garage, like I was consulting with, and they had no processes whatsoever. But you've got to create a process about how you do things, because if you're used to getting 1 and 2 or whatever unit orders, and all of a sudden, somebody from Brazil gives you a 1,000-unit order, how are you going to handle that? If you have no process in place, then you're going to really be scrambling, and it could cost you money. So create processes. And this is my final slide. Use the resources that are available out there. Small Business Administration, Department of Commerce, World Trade Center. The World Trade Center has 338 member organizations around the planet. You want to know what's going on in Singapore? Call the Singapore World Trade Center. You can join the World Trade Center, and it's very nominal, and it's very worthwhile. And they have an enormous amount of information. Okay, I'm on the board of directors, and so I'm giving you propaganda. But I've used them, and there are stories. But the World Trade Center, Department of Commerce, SBA, excuse me, and probably others are fantastic. Trade shows. Trade shows are good to find out what's in the industry, and to maybe an international trade show to find out if there is any attention or if there's any interest in your product. Be careful about trade shows. There's a trade show going on right now, and I think maybe it ended yesterday. It's called WEFTEC. It's Water Environment Federation Technical Conference. It's an international show. A booth there costs $6,000. Plus your travel, plus. It's really easy to drop 10 grand on WEFTEC. So if you're a small company and you go to WEFTEC, you better be thinking that you're going to come away with distributors, you're going to come away with potential customers or whatever, because that's a lot of money to spend to stand around in Chicago and not get anything for it. There are the Department of Commerce, the World Trade Center, a lot of industry organizations have big pavilions, and you can buy a little spot in a big pavilion for a little bit of money, and you get the same exposure. Be careful on trade shows. They're a lot of fun to go to, but they can cost you a lot of money and give you very little in return. Finally, get advice from somebody who's been there. Really, it's really worthwhile picking somebody's brain about maybe the specific territory that you're interested in, or going out to business internationally. Talk to people who've been there. Again, World Trade Center, the social events, the networking. A lot of people know a lot of things, and you can talk to them. And I guess my final bit of advice is go for it. I have done international for most of my business career. I love it. The harder, the better. It is the most rewarding business that I've ever done. And so obviously I'm a proponent. So that's it. And I hope I have time for questions. Do I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let me take a, thanks.